The Lone Rider and the Whispers of Trouble. The high plains shimmered under a sun that blazed like a blacksmith's forge, scorching the earth to a parched, reddish ochre. Dusty Jim, his features chiseled by tireless winds and relentless sun, rode with the unhurried grace of a man deeply attuned to his surroundings. His sorrel, Rusty, a sturdy mount with a distinct white blaze, maintained a steady, rhythmic stride, her hooves stirring miniature clouds of dust with each step. A soft, wordless melody, barely discernible over the saddle's creak, drifted from Dusty's lips, a tune born of vast solitude and the boundless sky, a quiet counterpoint to the chirping of unseen crickets and the hawk's distant cry circling high above. Dusty's gaze, the color of faded denim, meticulously swept the horizon. To his left, the Dragon's Tooth Mountains, a jagged fortress of stone, clawed at the sky, their long, cool shadows stretching across the afternoon landscape. To his right, the plains unfurled endlessly, a seamless tapestry of sagebrush and resilient grasses, whispering ancient secrets on the dry breeze. He had been en route to the sleepy hollow of redemption for provisions, coffee beans and flour, a familiar pilgrimage when his larder grew sparse. The profound peace of these solitary journeys was a soothing balm, a stark contrast to the occasional raucous gatherings in town. He much preferred the quiet companionship of Rusty and the meditative solitude of the land. Suddenly, Rusty's ears, usually at ease, snapped forward like drawn arrows. A low, rumbling snort of unease rumbled in the horse's chest. Dusty's humming faltered. His grip instinctively tightened on the reins, his senses instantly sharpened. Something was amiss. Rusty, with her keen wilderness instincts, had detected it first. Then, the sounds erupted, raw and discordant, lacerating the peaceful afternoon like splintering glass. Guttural, angry shouts echoed from the west, amplified by the natural acoustics of the canyons weaving through the foothills. A sharp rifle crack, a singular, definitive report, tore through the air, followed by another, then a rapid succession of shots. Gunfire. Not the desultory target practice of a lone rancher, but the chaotic, desperate sounds of a firefight. A knot tightened in Dusty's gut. The canyon in that direction was notorious as Rattlesnake Gulch, a treacherous, winding labyrinth of rock and shadow. It was a place generally shunned, even by seasoned prospectors, due to its unwelcoming terrain and the predatory reputation of its namesake. Whatever was transpiring, it was far from a friendly encounter. "Easy, boy," Dusty murmured, patting Rusty's neck. The horse shifted, powerful muscles rippling beneath the saddle. Rusty was an excellent judge of character and a devoted companion, but also a creature of primal instinct, and her instincts screamed danger. Dusty's hand instinctively found the familiar, worn grip of his Colt Peacemaker, holstered at his hip. He wasn't one to seek confrontation, but neither would he shy from it, especially when a faint, desperate cry, unmistakably a woman's, reached him. The sound sent a jolt through him, a primal urge to protect. His inherent shyness often made him clumsy around women, yet his unwavering sense of right and wrong, a cornerstone of his character, eclipsed any social discomfort. He reined Rusty to a halt, listening intently. The shouts had escalated to a frantic pitch, interspersed with the distinct clang of metal striking metal, suggesting the wield of knives or swords. This was no mere squabble, it sounded like a full-blown ambush. The cries of distress grew louder, borne on the wind, painting a vivid, unsettling tableau in Dusty's mind. He could continue his journey, ignore the commotion, and proceed to redemption. It would be the pragmatic, safe course of action. But the image of someone in peril, particularly a woman, gnawed at him. He couldn't simply turn a blind eye, not when the echoes of conflict still reverberated through the canyon, demanding intervention. With a sigh, a blend of resignation and resolve, Dusty nudged Rusty with his heels. "Looks like redemption will have to wait, old friend," he muttered, his voice low and firm. Rusty, as if comprehending the gravity of the situation, changed course without protest, her stride quickening towards the ominous mouth of Rattlesnake Gulch, towards the whispers of trouble. A giant's battle. The sun, a fiery orb, beat down on Dusty's brow as he topped the final rise. His pinto, weary from the relentless climb, snorted, its breath a cloud of dust in the still air. Dusty dismounted, tethering the horse to a gnarled mesquite, and crept forward, his worn boots silent on the loose scree. Below, in a shallow valley carved by an ancient, dry riverbed, a scene unfolded that stole his breath and chilled him to the bone. A woman, impossibly tall, stood amidst a swirling knot of men. Even from this distance, she dwarfed them, her silhouette a stark contrast against the sun-baked earth. Her movements were fluid, powerful, a dance of defiance against overwhelming odds. She wielded a long, polished staff, its ends whistling through the air with lethal precision. This was no ordinary woman, this was Bright Star, the giant Apache girl of whom whispers traveled on the wind. Dusty watched, mesmerized, as she spun, parrying a swinging rifle but with a clang that echoed faintly up the ridge. A bandit, emboldened by his comrades, lunged with a knife, but Bright Star met him with a swift, upward thrust of her staff, catching him squarely under the chin. He crumpled, a silent heap, and the others momentarily recoiled. Her hair, long and black, whipped around her face, momentarily obscuring her features, but Dusty saw the determined set of her jaw, the fierce glint in her eyes. There were at least a dozen of them, scruffy, hard-faced men with a predatory hunger in their movements. They were circling now, their initial surprise giving way to a grim resolve. Bright Star fought with a raw, untamed grace, each strike and block honed by instinct and a lifetime of survival. She moved with a speed that belied her towering stature, a whirlwind of motion against the static, encroaching circle. But even from his vantage point, Dusty could see the subtle signs of her struggle. Her breathing was becoming more labored, a slight tremor in her arms as she brought the staff around for another sweeping arc. A thin trickle of blood snaked down her temple, a testament to a blow that had found its mark. The men, sensing her fatigue, pressed their advantage. They no longer attacked one by one, but in pairs, their grimy hands reaching, their cruel eyes gleaming. A burly bandit, his face scarred and his teeth yellowed, managed to get inside her guard. He swung a heavy club, connecting with her shoulder with a sickening thud. Bright Star stumbled, a gasp escaping her lips, but she recovered quickly, her staff a blur as she drove him back. Yet, the momentary lapse was enough. Another bandit, smaller and quicker, darted in from the flank, aiming a kick at her knee. She blocked it with her forearm, but the impact sent a jolt through her frame. The circle tightened, each man a link in a chain designed to bind her. Their taunts, coarse and venomous, began to carry on the wind, chipping away at her resolve. Bright Star was a magnificent warrior, a force of nature, but she was only one against many. Her movements, once so fluid, were now punctuated by moments of desperate defense. Her staff, once an extension of her will, seemed heavier, each swing demanding more effort. Dusty's heart hammered against his ribs. He saw the glint of steel as one of the bandits drew a long hunting knife, closing in for a killing blow. Bright Star, her back against a cluster of sun-bleached rocks, was surrounded, her options dwindling. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her gaze darting from one attacker to the next, searching for an opening that wasn't there. She was a giant, yes, but she was also human, and she was clearly overwhelmed. The time for observation was over. Dusty's brave charge. The dust, thick as a shroud, swirled around Bright Star, stinging her eyes and coating her tongue. She was a whirlwind of motion, her movements blurring between defensive blocks and furious parries, but even her strength was finite. The bandits, emboldened by her faltering pace, pressed closer, their snarls and taunts cutting through the din of clashing steel and thudding blows. A glancing blow to her temple sent stars exploding behind her eyes, and she stumbled, momentarily disoriented. From the ridge, Dusty's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He watched Bright Star falter, the wild beauty of her fight dimming under the relentless assault. His gut twisted. This wasn't some abstract principle, this was a person, a brave soul, being overwhelmed. The quiet hum of his moral compass, usually a gentle thrum, now roared in his ears. He wasn't the kind to stand by. He never had been. "Rusty," he yelled, his voice raw, and dug his spurs into the horse's flanks. Rusty, a sturdy buckskin with a surprising turn of speed, responded instantly, leaping forward. Dusty leaned low, pulling his old Colt .45 from its holster. He wasn't a crack shot under pressure, but he could make a racket. "Yee-haw! Get off her, you yellow-bellied varmints," he bellowed, a sound he barely recognized as his own. He fired his pistol into the air, the crack echoing across the canyon, then again, aiming for the ground near the nearest bandit. The sudden, unexpected assault from a new quarter caused a ripple of confusion among the attackers. Their focus, until that moment solely fixed on Bright Star, splintered. Several heads whipped around, eyes narrowed against the setting sun to pinpoint the source of the gunfire and the wild, unhinged yelling. "Ambush!" one bandit shrieked, his voice cracking. Another, a hulking brute with a scarred face, roared, "Just one man. Get him!" The shift was instantaneous. What had been a focused, relentless attack on Bright Star now became a fragmented, confused scramble. A handful of bandits, their bloodlust redirected, turned towards Dusty, drawing their own weapons. This momentary reprieve was all Bright Star needed. The world had been a dizzying blur of pain and effort, her muscles screaming in protest. Then, the distinct crack of a pistol and a familiar, if somewhat strained, yell pierced the chaos. Dusty. She hadn't expected it, hadn't dared to hope. The distraction was a lifeline. With a gasp that pulled fresh air deep into her lungs, Bright Star pushed off the ground, her eyes blazing anew. The dull ache in her temple was still there, but now it was a distant throb, overshadowed by a surge of defiant strength. Her warrior's instincts took over. She moved with renewed ferocity, her tomahawk a silver blur, catching the nearest bandit unawares as he turned to face Dusty. The impact was brutal, sending him sprawling. She didn't pause, spinning to meet another, her movements fluid and deadly, like water over stone. The tide, for the first time since the ambush began, was turning. Victory and a quiet goodbye. The last bandit, a wiry man with a missing front tooth, lunged at Dusty, a rusty Bowie knife glinting dully in the fading light. Dusty, quicker than his lanky frame suggested, sidestepped the attack, bringing the butt of his Winchester down hard on the man's shoulder. A yelp of pain, a dropped knife, and the bandit scrambled backward, eyes wide with a fear that hadn't been there moments ago. Bright Star, meanwhile, had disarmed the final remaining outlaw with a swift, brutal kick to the elbow. The man's pistol clattered uselessly on the dusty earth. Her eyes, usually so stoic, blazed with a fierce satisfaction as she watched him stumble away, clutching his injured arm. The sound of hooves thundering into the distance confirmed their retreat. Silence, thick and heavy, descended upon the clearing, broken only by the ragged breathing of Dusty and the steady thrum of Bright Star's pulse. Dusty lowered his rifle, the tension slowly draining from his shoulders. He glanced at Bright Star, whose gaze was already fixed on him. "They're gone," he murmured, the words feeling almost inadequate after the storm of violence. Bright Star nodded, her expression unreadable for a moment before a deep, rumbling sound, a unique blend of gratitude and respect, emanated from her chest. "You fought well, Cactus Jim," she said, her voice carrying a quiet power that resonated in the twilight. "My life, I owe to you." She gave him a slow, deliberate nod, her dark eyes unwavering. Dusty felt a familiar flush creep up his neck. Compliments, especially from someone as formidable as Bright Star, always made him acutely uncomfortable. He shuffled his boots in the dirt. Just did what needed doing," he mumbled, avoiding her intense stare. He noticed then a thin, red line marring her left forearm, a shallow cut likely from a glancing blow during the skirmish. You're cut." Bright Star followed his gaze, her expression not changing. "It is nothing." Still, Dusty insisted, moving a step closer. He pulled a clean, folded bandana from his pocket, a small concession to his usual disheveled appearance. "Might get infected out here. Let me wrap it." She watched him, unmoving, as he carefully took her arm. Her skin was warm and firm beneath his fingers, and he worked with a delicate touch, mindful of the power that lay within her. The cut was indeed superficial, but he wrapped it carefully, tying the knot with a practiced hand. The proximity made him acutely aware of her presence, the faint scent of wood smoke and something wild, earthy, that was uniquely her. When he finished, he stepped back, a polite distance between them. Bright Star examined the bandaged arm, then looked at him again. Her lips curved slightly, a rare, fleeting smile that softened her features. "Thank you, Cactus Jim." The sun, a fiery orb, was beginning its descent, painting the western sky in hues of orange and purple. A sudden pang of loneliness, sharp and unexpected, pricked at Dusty. He knew what was coming. Bright Star moved toward her horse, a magnificent roan that had patiently waited out the chaos. She swung herself into the saddle with an effortless grace that belied her size. Her gaze swept over the clearing, then settled on Dusty one last time. "May your path be clear, and your spirit strong," she intoned, a traditional Apache blessing. With another nod, a silent farewell that spoke volumes, she reined her horse around. As the first stars began to prickle through the darkening sky, Bright Star rode away, a solitary figure silhouetted against the vibrant canvas of the sunset. Dusty watched until she was nothing more than a speck, then an imagined memory, swallowed by the vast, quiet expanse of the desert. He was alone again, the silence this time heavy with the echoes of a fierce fight and a quiet goodbye. The rancher's solitary routine. 5 days later, the rhythmic clang of hammer on nail echoed across Dusty Jim's small ranch, a familiar counterpoint to the chirping crickets. Sweat trickled down his temple, mingling with the dust that coated his weathered face as he wrestled a new plank into place on the sagging corral fence. The sun, a fiery orb sinking low in the western sky, cast long, distorted shadows of him and the lone, gnarled mesquite tree in the yard. Each swing of the hammer was deliberate, a small act of defiance against the inevitable decay that preyed on all things left untended. He wiped his brow with the back of a calloused hand, his gaze drifting to the distant, purple-hued mountains. The encounter in the canyon still felt more like a fever dream than a lived experience. The girl, the giant girl with eyes like polished obsidian and a spirit fiercer than any wild mustang he'd ever broken, had been an unexpected jolt to his quiet existence. He remembered the raw courage in her stance, the desperate glint in her eyes as she fought off those bandits. And then, the strange relief that had flooded him when he'd seen her ride off, a fleeting silhouette against the setting sun. A sigh escaped him, a puff of air that seemed to carry the weight of the vast, empty landscape around him. His life here was a tapestry woven from solitude and hard work. Sunrises painted the sky each morning, but there was no one to share the spectacle with. Dinners were eaten in silence, the only company the crackle of the fire and the occasional hoot of an owl. The days blurred into weeks, and weeks into months, each one a mirror of the last. He loved this land, the unforgiving beauty of it, the way it challenged him and rewarded his tenacity. But sometimes, especially after something as wild and unexpected as the canyon skirmish, the quiet felt less like peace and more like an aching void. He secured the last nail, testing the fence with a firm push. It held. Just like he held on, day after day, year after year. The thought of that girl, of her sheer presence, lingered like the scent of desert rain. She was so unlike anyone he had ever encountered, a force of nature in human form. It made his own existence, so rooted in the mundane tasks of ranching, feel even more isolated. As twilight deepened, painting the sky in hues of orange and deep violet, Dusty unhitched his hammer and walked towards the small, rough-hewn cabin. The aroma of simmering beans, left on the low embers of his morning fire, beckoned him. His movements were slow, deliberate, each step a familiar rhythm of his solitary routine. He stoked the fire, the sparks dancing in the dim light, momentarily chasing away the shadows. He poured himself a mug of coffee, strong and black, and sat on the worn wooden porch, gazing out at the stardusted sky. The only sound was the distant cry of a coyote, a lonely voice echoing his own. He wondered where she was now, that giant girl. He wondered if she ever thought of the quiet man who'd stumbled into her fight. And he wondered, with a pang he rarely acknowledged, if his life would ever hold anything more than this profound, beautiful loneliness. 5 figures on the horizon. The afternoon sun beat down, baking the dust until it shimmered, an invisible heat rising from the parched earth. Dusty, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow, leaned against the rough-hewn fence post, his gaze sweeping across the vast expanse of his ranch. The silence was absolute, broken only by the lazy hum of insects and the distant caw of a crow. He'd spent the morning mending a loose section of fence, his muscles aching with the familiar rhythm of physical labor. Now, with the sun arcing towards the west, he allowed himself a moment of respite, sipping from his canteen, the lukewarm water a small comfort. His eyes, accustomed to scanning the horizon for any change, any sign of life, narrowed. At first, it was just a distortion, a trick of the heat haze, but then it resolved into something more definite. 5 figures. Riders. And not just any riders. These were impossibly tall, even from this distance. A prickle of unease, quickly followed by a surge of wonder, went through him. His hand instinctively went to the Colt holstered at his hip, a gesture born of habit more than fear. But fear wasn't what he felt. Curiosity, yes. A strange, almost magnetic pull. As they drew closer, the details sharpened. 4 of the figures were undoubtedly women, their forms towering even astride their mounts. The 5th, equally statuesque, was an older woman, her posture regal, her silver hair catching the sun like a halo. And then, one of the riders leaned forward, her long, dark hair streaming in the wind, and Dusty's breath caught. Bright Star. There was no mistaking her proud bearing, the way she sat her horse with such effortless grace. A slow smile spread across his face, a genuine, unguarded expression he rarely showed. He knew he should be wary, 5 giants riding towards his isolated ranch, but the sight of her banished any lingering apprehension. The 3 other women, her sisters he presumed, rode with a similar quiet power. One, with hair like spun moonlight, seemed to observe everything with a keen, thoughtful gaze. Another, her eyes the color of a summer sky, carried herself with a gentle poise, a serene expression on her face. The 3rd, a vibrant contrast, possessed an almost fierce beauty, her movements quick and decisive even at a distance. And then there was the older woman, her features etched with wisdom and strength, her eyes, even from this far, seemed to pierce the distance, assessing, understanding. They rode with a purpose, a steady, unhurried pace that spoke of confidence and an unshakable resolve. Each hoofbeat resonated, a growing thrum against the vast silence of the prairie. The air around Dusty seemed to thicken with anticipation, a palpable energy that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. His heart pounded, not with alarm, but with a strange, exhilarating excitement. He hadn't known what to expect after Bright Star had ridden away, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. 5 figures, silhouetted against the sinking sun, drawing inexorably closer to his solitary home, each step a promise of the unknown. A mother's gratitude and a surprising offer. The morning sun, a gentle painter, cast long, golden shadows across Dusty's modest ranch. A light breeze rustled the cottonwoods, carrying the scent of drying sage. Dusty, still slightly discomfited by the previous day's events, was mending a fence post when he saw them approach. Bright Star led the way, her towering frame even more imposing with her 3 sisters flanking her, and a woman of striking elegance riding at the front. This must be Sky Woman. He lowered his hammer, his heart thumping a rhythm against his ribs that had nothing to do with exertion. They dismounted with a practiced grace, their movements fluid and silent. Bright Star offered a rare, almost imperceptible nod. Sky Woman stepped forward, her posture regal despite the dust of the trail. Her eyes, dark and intelligent, held a warmth that belied her serene expression. "Greetings, Dusty, Cactus, Jim," she said, her voice a melodious contralto, carrying a hint of the wind in the high desert. "I am Sky Woman, mother to Bright Star." She gestured to her daughters. "And these are Willow Song, Fawn Dancer, and Moon Shadow." Each sister offered a silent acknowledgement, their expressions ranging from Willow Song's gentle curiosity to Fawn Dancer's quiet appraisal. Dusty, feeling a blush creep up his neck, managed a simple, "Ma'am." "It's an honor." He felt his usual awkwardness around women amplify tenfold in the presence of such formidable grace. "The honor, Mr. Jim, is entirely ours," Sky Woman continued, her gaze unwavering. "Bright Star has told me of your bravery, of how you faced those treacherous men alone and saved her life. She speaks of your courage with a reverence I have rarely heard from her. Our family owes you a debt that words alone cannot repay." Her eyes, momentarily, softened with profound gratitude. "You risked everything for my daughter, for a stranger. Such valor is rare, and deeply respected among our people." Dusty shuffled his feet, uncomfortable with the praise. "Just did what was right, ma'am. Anyone would've." Sky Woman's smile was knowing. "Many would not. Many would turn away from danger, or from one they did not know. But you did not. You stood your ground, and for that, we are eternally grateful." She paused, her gaze sweeping over her daughters, then back to Dusty. A new light, intense and purposeful, entered her eyes. "Our traditions are strong, Mr. Jim. When a man saves a woman's life, especially with such selflessness, it creates a bond that transcends mere thanks." Dusty felt a prickle of unease. He'd heard snippets of tribal customs, but his knowledge was thin. "Therefore," Sky Woman stated, her voice steady and clear, in a gesture of profound gratitude, "and with the full consent of my daughters and myself, we offer ourselves to you. As your wives, Mr. Jim." The words hung in the air, heavier than the desert heat. Dusty's jaw dropped. He stared, first at Sky Woman, then at Bright Star, whose stoic face revealed nothing, then at Willow Song, who looked down shyly, and finally at the other two, whose expressions were unreadable. 5 women. 5 magnificent, formidable women. His mind reeled. He, Dusty Jim, the quiet rancher, offered a family. His ranch, his life, suddenly felt very small. The silence stretched, filled only by the whisper of the wind and the frantic hammering of Dusty's heart. A world transformed. Dusty's jaw went slack, a tiny, almost inaudible click as it unhinged. His heart, already thrumming from the preceding confrontation, now hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. Wives? Plural? The word echoed in the sudden quiet of his small ranch house, each syllable landing with the weight of a stone. He stared, wide-eyed, at the 5 women arrayed before him. Bright Star, her gaze steady and unwavering, stood closest, her hand still resting on the hilt of her knife. Behind her, Sky Woman radiated an almost ethereal grace, a serene smile playing on her lips. Willow Song, ever the gentlest, offered a shy, hopeful look. The other 2, whose names he hadn't yet learned, watched with an intensity that made his cheeks flush. His gaze swept over them, a kaleidoscope of towering beauty and quiet strength. Bright Star, the warrior he'd saved, now offered him not just gratitude, but a future so outlandish it felt like a fever dream. Sky Woman, their matriarch, had delivered the proposal with a solemnity that left no room for doubt about its sincerity. It wasn't a jest, it was a genuine offer. He thought of his solitary existence. The empty chairs at his dinner table, the quiet evening spent with only the crackle of the fire for company. His days were filled with the rhythmic creak of his saddle, the lowing of cattle, the vast, silent expanse of the prairie. He'd known loneliness, a deep, abiding companion since his parents passed. He'd envisioned a wife, perhaps, one day, a small, quiet woman who might share his simple life. But this was an entirely different universe. The scent of pine needles and something uniquely feminine, a blend of wild herbs and clean air, filled his small home. It was intoxicating, overwhelming. The sheer power radiating from these women, their statuesque forms, their unwavering confidence, was a force unlike anything he'd ever encountered. He, a humble rancher, barely scraped by on this unforgiving land. What could he offer them? What magic did they see in him, a man who mostly conversed with horses and his own thoughts? A faint blush crept up his neck as he realized he'd been silent for too long, gawking like a simpleton. He ran a hand through his sandy hair, feeling the rough stubble of his unshaven jaw. "Wives," he managed, the word a mere whisper. His voice sounded rusty, unused to such profound pronouncements. Sky Woman stepped forward, her voice a soothing balm. "We offer a life of partnership, of shared strength, of family. Our ways are different, perhaps, from what you know, but our hearts are true. You saved Bright Star. You showed courage and honor. These are qualities we cherish. We see a good man, Dusty Jim, and a future intertwined with yours." He looked at Bright Star, whose eyes, dark and deep as a midnight lake, held a newfound softness. He remembered the fierce glint in them as she fought the bandits, the primal scream that had preceded her attack. Now, those same eyes offered him a future he couldn't even begin to comprehend. The weight of their combined gaze felt like a physical pressure, a challenge, an invitation. His heart pounded with a wild, exhilarating rhythm. His world, he realized with a jolt, was already transformed, whether he accepted or not. A new beginning. The desert wind, usually a solitary whisper, seemed to hold its breath. Dusty, standing amidst the women who had, in just a few short days, rewritten the very landscape of his lonely existence, felt the weight of their offer settle upon him. It wasn't just a proposition, it was a chasm opening, promising to swallow the solitary, dusty trail he'd walked and replace it with a vibrant, uncharted path. He looked from Sky Woman's steady gaze to Bright Star's fierce, unwavering eyes, then to Willow Song, who offered a tentative, hopeful smile. His gaze finally settled on the ground, scuffing the toe of his boot in the dry earth. He thought of the long, silent dinners, the sunrises he'd watched alone, the endless stretches of land that echoed only his own thoughts. His ranch, a testament to his independence, had also been a monument to his isolation. Now, the scent of pinyon mixed with something new, the subtle perfume of these women, a promise of shared lives, laughter, and perhaps, even love. The thought made his chest tighten, a combination of trepidation and an unfamiliar, thrilling anticipation. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Dusty lifted his head. A shy, almost imperceptible smile played at the corners of his lips, a small crack in the stoic facade he'd worn for so long. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken possibilities. "Bright Star," he began, his voice a little rough, "you saved my life. You and your sisters, you brought me back from the edge of." He trailed off, the memory of the ambush still sharp. "And Sky Woman, you honored me by coming here. All of you, you've shown me a kindness I ain't ever known." He swallowed, his gaze sweeping over them, lingering for a moment on Bright Star, then Sky Woman, then Willow Song. "My life, it's been a long, quiet road. This ranch, it's all I've had. But it's been empty." He paused, searching for the right words, the ones that could convey the seismic shift occurring within him. I accept." The words, once spoken, felt like a dam breaking. "I accept your offer. All of you." A collective sigh, soft and profound, rippled through the group. Bright Star's stern expression softened into a look of quiet triumph. Sky Woman's elegant features relaxed, a knowing smile gracing her lips. Willow Song's shy smile widened, her eyes sparkling with a gentle joy. "My home," Dusty continued, gesturing vaguely to the sturdy cabin behind him, "it's not much. But it's yours now too. we'll make it bigger. We'll make it a place for all of us. He felt a lightness he hadn't known was possible, a burden lifted, replaced by a sense of shared purpose. The idea of waking up to their faces, of sharing meals, of building a future together, was no longer a fantastical dream but a tangible reality. He imagined the ranch, no longer a solitary outpost, but a bustling home, filled with the presence of these extraordinary women. He pictured Bright Star, her strength and resilience a beacon, Sky Woman, her wisdom a guiding star, and Willow Song, her gentle spirit weaving beauty into their lives. His solitary days, he knew, were wonderfully, irrevocably over. He looked out at the vast, sun-drenched landscape, seeing it not as an endless expanse of loneliness, but as the fertile ground for a new, shared future, built upon respect, courage, and an unexpected, overwhelming sense of belonging.